There's a quiet kind of heaviness we carry as the years pass, not always in our bodies, but tucked away in our hearts and minds, built from old expectations, worn-out worries, and silent regrets we never meant to keep. I remember one evening, sitting alone on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees, realizing that the things weighing me down weren't the years themselves, but the invisible burdens I hadn't yet laid down. At 70, 75, or even 85, the world outside grows quieter, but inside, it can still feel crowded. What if the real path to peace isn't in doing more or holding tighter, but in gently letting go? Letting go of the old guilt, the endless need to stay busy, the comparisons to who we once were or who we thought we should have been. In today's journey, I'll walk with you through 9 powerful things you can release to live a lighter, freer, more joyful life after 70. If you find even one moment today that speaks to your heart, I invite you to tap the like button, subscribe for more elder wisdom, and type a simple "I'm ready" in the comments. Your story matters, and you are not alone. Let's begin. Sometimes the heaviest burdens we carry are the words we never say, the feelings we tuck away behind a tired smile, the quiet moments when someone asks how we're doing and we answer automatically, "I'm fine," even though a part of us aches to be understood. It's a habit we learn over decades, perhaps from a time when showing need was mistaken for weakness, or when life demanded we press on without complaint. Yet as the years pass, this simple phrase can become a silent wall, keeping connection, comfort and healing just beyond our reach. I remember sitting in the waiting room at the clinic one autumn morning, the smell of coffee lingering in the air, the nurses bustling back and forth, and an elderly man sitting beside me with a cane leaning against his leg. When the nurse asked him gently, "How are you feeling today?" he smiled, almost reflexively, and said, "I'm fine." But in the way he shifted his weight, in the way his hands trembled ever so slightly, it was clear he wasn't. And yet no one pressed further, and he didn't offer more. And a moment where real presence could have entered simply passed by, unnoticed. In many ways, we all become that man. We tell ourselves we don't want to burden our families. We convince ourselves that loneliness is easier to bear than vulnerability. We pretend the silence doesn't hurt because admitting it might open a flood we no longer know how to hold back. But true peace doesn't come from hiding the cracks in our armor. It comes from accepting that we don't have to wear armor at all. At this stage in life, your presence, your real, unguarded presence, is a gift, not a burden. Saying, "I'm feeling a little lonely today," or "I could use a little company," doesn't make you needy. It makes you brave. Because the truth is, those around you, neighbors, grandchildren, old friends, are often looking for a way to connect, to offer kindness, to be part of your life in a meaningful way. When you let them in, you're not only healing your own heart, you're giving them permission to open theirs as well. Vulnerability is not a sign that you are falling apart. It's a sign that you are still alive, still capable of forming bonds that are real and sustaining. Imagine how differently a Sunday afternoon might feel if instead of sitting by the window waiting for the phone to ring, you reached out and said, "I'd love a little visit." Imagine the comfort of laughter shared over coffee, or the simple beauty of sitting side by side in silence with someone who cares. These are not grand gestures. They are the daily miracles that fill the heart, that keep the spirit resilient, that remind us we are part of something larger than ourselves. Letting go of the reflex to say, "I'm fine," is not about exposing your wounds to everyone you meet. It's about choosing carefully and courageously to let the right people see you honestly. It's about understanding that strength now looks different than it did when you were younger. Strength today is softer. It is wise enough to know that peace grows in the soil of authenticity, not in the armor of pretense. Every time you speak your truth with kindness, you lift a little more of that old weight off your shoulders. You make space for presence, for freedom, for the kind of healing that only comes when we stop hiding and start living openly. So the next time someone asks, "How are you?" pause for just a moment longer. Listen to your heart. And if you feel even a small nudge to answer honestly, trust it. Because sometimes A single real answer can be the beginning of a lighter, more beautiful season of life, the kind you have earned and the kind you still deeply deserve. As we gently continue this path toward a lighter, freer life, there's another silent burden that deserves to be released. The belief that needing connection, understanding and care somehow makes you a burden. For many of us, this idea took root early, whispered by generations that taught strength meant silence, that asking for comfort was a weakness, and that independence mattered more than tenderness. Yet, as the seasons of life change, as the world around us grows quieter, the truth becomes clearer. Emotional needs do not vanish with age, they deepen, and honoring them is not weakness. It is a profound act of wisdom. I still remember a neighbor named Helen, a woman of quiet grace who lived alone after her husband passed. She would wave from her porch every afternoon, always smiling, always doing fine. But one evening, after a gentle rain had softened the air, she said quietly, almost apologetically, "Sometimes I wish someone would just sit with me and not expect anything." That small confession, almost hidden among the chatter of daily life, carried more truth than 100 cheerful greetings. She wasn't broken or needy, she was simply human. At this stage of life, emotional connection isn't a luxury, it is as essential as breath. The need to be seen, to be heard, to feel valued remains strong because the heart does not grow old. It only gathers more tenderness along the way. Wanting to share your thoughts over a cup of coffee, wishing for a hug without needing to explain, why hoping someone might ask about your day and truly listen, these are not signs of fading strength. They are signs that you are still alive with longing, still capable of giving and receiving the daily miracles of presence. Letting go of the belief that your needs are too much is not only an act of healing for yourself, it opens a door for others too. It teaches your children, your friends, even your neighbors, that emotional connection is not something we outgrow. It reminds the world that aging gracefully is not about disappearing, it's about shining quietly, honestly, and tenderly, offering your presence and allowing others to offer theirs in return. And in that gentle exchange, the loneliness that once seemed inevitable often dissolves, replaced by the enduring warmth of being part of something deeply, beautifully human. As we move deeper into this journey of release and renewal, there comes a quieter but perhaps harder truth to face. The relationships we have long held onto out of habit, obligation, or fear, even when they quietly erode the peace we have worked so hard to find. It is not an easy thing to admit that some connections we nurtured for years have turned into heavy weights, pulling gently but steadily on our spirit. Yet the wisdom of age teaches us that real love, real friendship, and real respect should never leave us feeling small or invisible. I once watched a dear friend, Margaret, slowly distance herself from a neighbor who for decades had used every conversation to criticize, to compare, to drain the joy out of even the simplest moments. Margaret didn't make a grand announcement or stage a confrontation. Instead, she began choosing her peace more often than her guilt, spending more afternoons at the library, more mornings tending her flowers, letting the calls she once dreaded go unanswered without apology. It wasn't anger that drove her. It was the quiet recognition that time is too precious, that the heart is too sacred to be spent where it is not valued. At this stage of life, every day carries a quiet richness that deserves to be protected. If a friendship, a family tie, or even a long-held bond leaves you feeling diminished, anxious, or weary, it is not disloyalty to set it down. It is an act of deep respect for the life you still have left to live. Letting go does not always mean doors slammed or harsh words spoken. Sometimes it simply means stepping gently back into your own presence, reclaiming the peace that is your birthright. You have given so much across the years, your patience, your forgiveness, your energy, and none of it was wasted. But now it is time to give yourself the same devotion you once gave so freely to others. Choosing a lighter, kinder company is not selfishness, it is senior wisdom at its finest. It is understanding at last that real companionship nurtures your spirit, lifts your heart, and honors your journey. And you, dear soul, have earned the right to walk this next chapter surrounded only by those who make your presence feel like a homecoming, not a battlefield. As we continue walking gently through the layers that weigh on our peace, we come to another quiet truth, the belief that we must always be doing, always proving, always moving to justify our worth. It is a lesson deeply etched into many of us, taught by years of work, sacrifice, and endless responsibility. But as the seasons of life shift, the need to stay constantly busy becomes less a source of pride and more a quiet thief of presence. I think back to a morning not long ago, watching an old friend, Samuel, move methodically from one task to the next. Fixing a gate that didn't truly need fixing, rearranging tools he rarely used anymore, sweeping the same patch of driveway twice. His hands were steady, his mind focused, but his eyes, when they caught a glimpse of the blooming magnolia tree across the yard, carried a flicker of longing he quickly brushed away. Like so many of us, he had spent a lifetime defining himself by how much he accomplished, by the visible proof of his usefulness, never realizing that being still could also be a kind of wisdom, a kind of grace. At 70, at 80, at any stage when the heart begins to listen more carefully to the rhythms of life, it is not more busyness we need, it is more being. Being present enough to notice the way sunlight dances across the floor. Being still enough to hear the birds singing, not in the background but right there, as part of the living, breathing fabric of the day. Choosing rest, choosing reflection, choosing a slower breath is not laziness, it is claiming a deeper presence, one where meaning is no longer measured by checklists, but by moments of quiet joy. Letting go of the need to stay busy is not about abandoning purpose. It is about letting your value be rooted in your being, not your doing. It is an invitation to live with full presence instead of constant motion, to allow peace to settle where exhaustion once lived. And when you give yourself permission to simply be, you might find that the truest successes are no longer the ones others can tally, but the ones your own soul can feel. Lighter, freer, more deeply alive. As we step even deeper into this quiet work of letting go, there's a tender burden that often lingers without our notice, the way we measure our today against the memory of who we once were, or the image of someone younger, moving faster, seeming brighter. It happens quietly, almost without permission, a fleeting glance in the mirror, a memory of old strength, a bittersweet pang watching children and grandchildren race toward futures still wide open. Yet if we listen closely to the deeper wisdom life offers, we realize that comparison is a weight we were never meant to carry through these sacred later years. I remember visiting a friend, Mary, who had just celebrated her 82nd birthday. She sat by her living room window, the sunlight pooling around her, watching the neighborhood children race their bicycles down the hill. There was a softness in her gaze, but also a shadow of longing, a trace of that old habit whispering, "I used to be like them." She smiled and said, half to herself, "My legs can't run anymore, but my heart still does." In that moment, I understood. Life is not less beautiful because it has slowed. It is often more radiant because we now have the eyes to truly see it. When you stop comparing your now to your past, when you stop measuring your value against the speed or sparkle of others, you create space for the gifts only this season of life can give. There is a peace in walking slower, in savoring more, in speaking with the weight of years lived and lessons learned. You are not the wrinkles or the aches. You are the light that shines through them, softened by time, stronger for the storms you have weathered. Letting go of comparison is not about pretending you haven't changed. It is about honoring the grace with which you have. It is seeing your reflection not with judgment, but with deep, unwavering acceptance. And in doing so, you free yourself to experience life not as a race to be won, but as a presence to be savored, moment by gentle moment, breath by steady breath. As we travel further along this path of gentle release, another hidden weight often rises from the corners of memory, the old guilt, the quiet regret over things said, things left undone, moments where we wish we had been wiser, kinder, braver. It is a tender ache that lingers in the heart, especially when the house grows quiet and the days stretch longer. But holding on to guilt does not honor the lessons we have lived. It only binds us to a past we can no longer change, stealing the key. Presence and peace we deserve to claim now. I once sat with an old friend named Robert, a man who carried a softness in his voice and a heaviness in his gaze. Over coffee one morning, he spoke of a falling out with his brother decades ago, a silence that grew longer year by year until no bridge seemed wide enough to cross. His regret was palpable, yet as he spoke, it was clear that his brother had long since moved on, while Robert remained trapped, carrying a burden that belonged to a time already gone. It was a reminder that guilt, if not released, becomes a prison of our own making, keeping us locked in moments that no longer need to define us. Forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is not about forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It is about accepting that even the wisest hearts stumble, even the kindest souls sometimes fall short. You have already paid for your mistakes 1,000 times over in your thoughts, in your longing to undo them. Now it is time to let grace enter, to believe that you are still worthy of healing, still capable of living this chapter with lightness rather than carrying the heavy stones of regret. When you let go of guilt, you do not lose the memories or the lessons, you lose only the chains. You make space for a freer breath, a softer gaze toward yourself, a heart that no longer flinches at its own reflection, and in that sacred release, you reclaim something too precious to delay any longer, the right to walk forward unburdened, to meet the days ahead not as a penitent, but as a soul finally at peace with its own beautiful, imperfect humanity. As we continue unfolding the layers that have quietly weighed on our spirit, there is one more subtle burden that often clings without our full awareness, the urge to control, to steer every moment, to shield ourselves and those we love from the unpredictability of life. It is a natural instinct, born from years of caring, building, protecting, and surviving. Yet as time softens the pace of our days, clinging too tightly can harden the heart and steal the peace that is now waiting to come in. I remember watching an old neighbor, Mr. Wallace, a man of great resilience, who spent much of his retirement trying to organize every part of his world. He scheduled his family's visits down to the hour, insisted the garden be watered a certain way, and even corrected the way his grandchildren played checkers. Though his heart meant well, the joy he sought often slipped further away, replaced by frustration and disappointment when life, with its wild heart, refused to follow his plans. In those small moments, it became clear that the deeper wisdom lay not in controlling everything, but in learning to trust, to let life be messy and beautiful and imperfect all at once. Letting go of the need to control is not about giving up. It is about choosing presence over resistance. It is about recognizing that you can offer love without managing every outcome, that you can find healing not by bracing against change, but by leaning into it with open hands. When you release the tight grip on how things should unfold, you make room for serendipity, for quiet miracles that you never could have orchestrated. You allow relationships to breathe, to grow, to surprise you. You grant your own heart a softer, more forgiving rhythm. And perhaps most importantly, you offer yourself the profound gift of peace, not the peace that comes from having everything in order, but the peace that arises from trusting you will meet whatever comes with the quiet strength you have spent a lifetime building. In surrender, there is freedom. In loosening your grasp, there is lightness. And in trusting the flow of life, you step into a deeper presence, where healing is no longer something you chase, but something that gently, finally, finds you. As we continue clearing the spaces within and around us, there is another quiet invitation, waiting, a call to release not only the clutter that fills our closets, but also the unseen clutter that crowds our minds. It is easy over the course of a long and rich life to gather more than we realize, more objects, more memories, more should-haves and could-haves tucked into corners we seldom visit, both in our homes and in our hearts. Yet, there comes a time when the weight of what we have accumulated begins to outweigh its meaning, and the soul, craving peace, whispers for something simpler, lighter, freer. I remember visiting a distant aunt one spring afternoon, her home lined with decades of keepsakes, dusty photo albums, unopened boxes, teacups from forgotten trips, piles of papers stacked with intentions never fulfilled. It was beautiful in a way, but also overwhelming, as if the air itself carried the heaviness of too many yesterdays. And gently, in the middle of that crowded room, she said, "I think I'm ready to make space for breathing again." There was no sadness in her voice, only a quiet hopefulness, a readiness to exchange clutter for clarity. Letting go of physical clutter is not about discarding your life story. It is about choosing with tender discernment what truly nourishes your spirit today. It is about walking into a room and feeling peace instead of pressure, recognizing that memories live not in objects, but in the heart that still beats steadily within your chest. And equally, clearing the mental clutter, old worries, unfinished conversations, self-criticism, frees your inner landscape to welcome presence, to notice the sunlight on the windowsill, the laughter drifting in from outside, the small, perfect details that only the uncluttered heart has the space to hold. When you release what no longer serves you, you honor not only where you have been, but where you are still going. You make room for stillness, for breath, for the kind of everyday miracles that often go unseen under the piles we meant to sort through someday. And in that open space, you find not emptiness, but the peaceful, powerful reminder that life itself is enough, and that simplicity at this stage is not a loss, but a profound and healing gain. As we near the heart of this journey, there is one final thread to untangle, one last quiet weight to set down, the belief that the door to new joy has already closed, that the best moments are memories rather than possibilities. It is easy as the years stretch onward to feel that certain experiences, certain adventures, even certain kinds of laughter belong only to the young. Yet if we listen gently to the deeper wisdom stirring within, we realize that joy is not bound by age or circumstance. It is waiting patiently wherever we are willing to invite it in. I remember meeting a woman named Eleanor who, at 78, signed up for her first pottery class at the community center. Her hands were slower now, her fingers bent slightly by the years, but as she shaped the cool clay, a soft light returned to her face, a simple, radiant aliveness that spoke louder than any words. She laughed at the awkward shapes she made, celebrated the tiny triumphs of a bowl that finally held its shape, and in that humble room with shelves lined with imperfect, beautiful creations, she discovered that wonder had never left her. It had only been waiting for her to say yes again. Letting go of the belief that joy has an expiration date is an act of profound courage. It is allowing yourself to step into newness with curiosity, rather than fear, to accept that beginnings do not belong only to the young but to the willing. Maybe it is planting a garden you always dreamed of, or writing the story you carried quietly for decades, or joining a choir just to feel the tremble of music in your chest once more. Whatever it looks like, the doorway to joy remains open, not because you are untouched by time, but because you are still deeply, vibrantly alive within it. In choosing to believe that it is not too late, you free yourself to taste the sweet, simple miracles of being here now, with a heart that still longs, still feels, still shines. And in that choice, you honor not only the years that have passed, but the precious open moments that are still waiting with outstretched hands, ready to welcome you back into the living dance of life. As we come to the end of this journey together, perhaps you feel a quiet stirring within, a recognition that letting go is not a loss but a return, a way of making space for peace, healing, and deeper presence in the life you are still so blessed to live. Every small release, every gentle surrender is a step closer to the freedom you deserve after all these years of carrying, building, loving, and enduring. Remember, it is never too late to choose lighter mornings, softer thoughts, and simpler joys. You have earned this new season, not by doing more, but by becoming more real, more honest, more free. I would love to hear your reflections. Which of these 9 invitations speaks most to your heart today? Please share your story in the comments below. Your voice, your wisdom, and your journey could bring comfort and courage to someone else, walking this beautiful path of aging gracefully. Thank you for being here.